Markus, I get excited when I meet people like you who are building interesting technology. What inspired you into starting Bolt?
Ever since I was 5, 6 years old, I've been very passionate about technology. I realized that that's the place to be if you want to have a big positive impact on the world. Especially if you're coming from a small country like Estonia, that was also just 1.3 million people and quite poor back in the 90s. There was no other way how you could actually build a big business and impact the lives of a lot of people.
And did you, when you're building Bolt, did you think it was going to become a unicorn?
My dream always was that I want to build the largest technology company in the world. At first, everybody was saying that it's a bit silly, it's a bit too ambitious. Well, now 9 years in, I think it's becoming more and more of a possibility.
Yeah. And what were the things that the things that you did to make sure that you're building the biggest business in the world?
Well, it always starts off from people. So the first 5 years, I made the mistake of trying to do everything myself. So I was way too hands-on, way too much in the details. So it took me a lot of learning to learn to how do you find the best people? How do you get them excited to join? How do you delegate to them? How do you educate them? So that's been a big learning curve.
Okay, so this growth, because Bolt has really grown, and very fast for that matter. Yeah, how do you manage that?
Well, it's never easy. It's really a lot of hard work every day, 9 years in. But again, what makes it a lot easier is if you got great people. So I think for us, what makes the world go around is having great people around. And we think that, again, it comes down to how do you hire, how do you get people excited, how do you onboard them. So that's something I'm spending a lot of my time on.
Okay, and when you look at the markets that you're in today, which ones have the greatest growth?
Actually, Africa is the fastest growing region we have. So we operate in 45 countries today, and actually East Africa especially has been an outlier in the last couple of years where it's picking up extremely well. And I think we're just scratching the surface here. So when you look at the population, we're already starting to hit 50 million customers in Africa. We're just about to hit that milestone. But again, when you think about it, there's more than 1 billion people in Africa. So we're just getting started.
And what do you think? What do you think is driving that growth?
Ultimately, growth is only driven by one thing. You need to have an amazing product. There's no substitute for that. I'm not a very big believer in marketing. I think what makes the product grow is word of mouth. You got to build a great product. If people will like it, they will tell their friends, who will tell their friends, and that's been our core belief from day one.
So a lot of businesses, especially from a startup point of view, struggle to deal with regulations, especially when you're doing cross country, and Bolt is in 45 countries. How do you manage that, the regulatory environment in all those countries?
Actually, it's very interesting. So when you study new industries, generally what happens is that at first there's no regulation at all. And that was the case for us as well. So back in the day, we didn't worry about regulation. The first 5 years, we barely spent any time on it. But then what happened was that the industry started to get more mature and it started to have a much bigger impact. So suddenly, politicians realized that, hey, I have tens of thousands of people driving around who are actually getting jobs from these platforms. And you have millions of people who use these platforms for their daily commute. Then they started to think, hey, actually we should regulate this to find actually what do we improve about this sector. And now, of course, regulation is a massive part of our company. So we put a lot of time into educating politicians. What do we see is working in one part of the world? Maybe we can apply it here or vice versa.
How do you incentivize your suppliers, so to speak? Because the drivers are your suppliers, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately what they care about is earnings, right? So our core belief from day one has been that the only way for us to grow as a company is to make the drivers happy. And then unless they're not happy, you're not going to grow. So when we look at Kenya, for example, we now have 50,000 drivers here, and that number keeps on going up every month. So again, why do drivers prefer us over other platforms? Generally, it's because of earnings. So they need to make sure that they actually get good earnings from us, better than from other platforms. That's why they join us. The second part that, of course, care about is safety. So you got to make sure that the platform actually is safe for everybody to use, both passengers and drivers.
Okay. So there's been a lot of talk about climate change. What are you guys doing about climate change?
Climate change is at the very core of what we're trying to do as a company. Our mission statement actually is we want to build cities for people, not cars. So what we mean by that is that today, especially in Europe, our cities are fully car dominated. everything is built around the car. You have highways, you have parking spots, and there's very little space in most cases left for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcycles. So everything is very car-centric. So what does that mean? I mean, if you move people around in large cars that weigh a ton or two, that creates tremendous amount of emissions. Transport is one of the biggest polluters in the world. So what we are trying to do is replace that. Everybody would not move by a car, but they would actually move through other modes of transportation. So they could actually walk, cycle, use public transport, and when they really need it, they can use Bolt's services. But it's not like that would be the only thing that they need to use every day. So we don't think we're alone going to be solving this. We need to partner with cities, and we actually need to have good infrastructure so people could walk and cycle around.
Interesting. Because I look at when you say green cities, that's what everybody is aiming for. So that's what Bolt is also pushing.
Absolutely. That's actually, I think we're the biggest company pushing for that. So overall, all cities start off and they're all built around transportation. So if you look at how cities were built more than 100 years ago, there were barely any cars. And they look completely different than what they look now when everything is car-centric. So actually what I see is the opportunity is that many African cities can actually leapfrog the mistakes that Europe has done, which is that we built all of our cities all around cars. We thought that's great. It was a big status symbol. And now, 100 years in, everybody realized that's actually not such a great thing. Actually, it was much nicer when cities were more dense. You could walk to places. You didn't always need to take a car. And actually, they're now reverting that. So they're taking away space from highways, from parking spots. They're converting cities to be for people. And we think Bolt is going to be the driving company doing that across the world.
So sometimes I look at the progression of businesses. So Taxify, then Bolt, ride hailing, and now it's a platform. Tell me about what next.
So when I look at our journey, we actually had a lot of ideas what to do from day one. So back when we started in 2013, we already had then a list of ideas of everything we could build. But it was a lot of discipline the first 5 years to just stay focused on one thing. So we really wanted to become the world's best at doing our core product of ride hailing. And we did that. And then in 2018, we were ready to start adding new products. So the next one we actually added was electric light vehicles. So we were the first ride-hailing platform in the world to launch electric scooters. So, and that we're actually today the largest operator in the world on that. So we have hundreds of thousands of electric scooters that people can rent on demand, which of course is great. It reduces traffic, reduces pollution. And then on top of that, we started to add more and more products. So then came Bolt Food from restaurants, then came Bolt Market from grocery stores, then came our Bolt Drive car sharing product, and all of those 5 still have tremendous room to grow. And of course, we have a whole big list of ideas of everything else we could build, but for the time being, we're focused on making sure that those 5 were best at the world.
So are those all in the pipeline for Kenya and Africa?
So actually, we're very excited to be bringing them to all of our countries over time. So our ride-hailing product is now in 45 countries. The other ones are depending on the product. First ones are just in 3 countries, some are in 10, some are in 20. So, and of course, Africa is on that list, so we want to eventually bring them all here as well.
Tell me, how does it feel to be the leader of a unicorn?
Actually, I don't think that milestone had too much significance for me personally, because I always had this ambition that we're going to build one of the greatest organizations, at least in Europe at first, and then hopefully around the world. So it wasn't like there was some binary point for me where something really changed. For me, it's like every single day I come in to make the products better, to serve our drivers better, to serve our customers better. It wasn't like there was some point where I felt like, okay, now I've made it or anything like that. Still, every day I work as hard as I did 9 years.
And how about the pressure? Say from pressure from customers, pressure from investors, pressure from everyone.
Well, pressure is obviously going up a lot, right? So, I mean, every day I'm still reading comments and feedback from customer support tickets, from social media. And of course, it's very painful for me to see that whenever customers or drivers are not happy with it, right? So I'm working every day very hard to make sure that as many of them are happy as they can be. And again, we need to recognize, with 100 million customers, with 1 million drivers, we can never make everyone happy, but I mean, that's what we aspire to do.
Data and privacy. That's also a big topic. What's your take on it?
I think it's absolutely critical, especially when people think about the data about where they live, where they go. That is some of the most sensitive the data that people have. So we're taking it very seriously.
So what steps do you have to make sure that people's privacy is maintained, and you are compliant with each country's regulation?
Well, Europe was one of the first places in the world to introduce very strong privacy laws with GDPR. And being originally, I mean, from Estonia and part of the European Union, we of course had to comply with all of that. And still today, it's one of the strictest, one of the most safe privacy regulations there is. So I think that's a great foundation. But then on top of that, of course, we can't just stop there. So we have a lot of internal people working on the technology side, on the operation side, to make sure that no data ever leaks the company.
So when you wake up in the morning, like every day when you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing you do?
First thing I actually do, I oftentimes just check the metrics. So still to this day, I mean, I'm very keen on just opening the app, checking the latest reports. How is the company doing? So it's something I'm always very paranoid about. Once that is done, I always try to at least have 5-10 minutes of exercise, and then I'm on my way to office.
So there's a lot of people who are trying to build stuff in Africa. What advice would you give them, especially around scaling?
Well, first of all, I'd actually recommend just more people to start. Because again, when you look at the world, there's never been a better time to start a technology company, especially in the world of internet and software. The barriers to entry are very low. It's relatively easy for people to learn how to code online. You can just learn it for free. It's relatively cheap to launch your product, especially if it's just an online product. And you have more access to capital and funding than ever. Here in Nairobi as well, there's now a lot of capital that's chasing startups. So I would actually just recommend more people to go for it.
Mm-hmm. So tell me one thing that nobody in Bold knows about Markus.
Interesting. Well, most people already know that I don't have a driver's license. So that's something. But actually, maybe more secret thing is that in a couple of months, I have a game coming up in chess with the chess world champion. So that's something I'm preparing for. I'm for sure gonna lose, but I'll do my best.
Interesting. No, thank you so much, Markus.
It was a pleasure.
It was nice speaking to you.
Absolutely.
And all the best in all the plans that you have for Bold.
Thank you. Likewise.
Okay, thank you.